Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to go over the 10.2 Season 3 trinkets for healers as they stand at the moment. Not all of the trinkets have been updated to questionablyepic.com, where we're getting some of this information. Shout out to Volk, who's putting this all together for us to highlight for you today. He also wrote a great article going over some of the fine-tuning of the trinkets, where they stand, how they work. So for this, we're going to start by showing the overall chart. This is also going to be helpful for knowing where things stand, and this will be up on Questionably Epic as the season gets itself started. A very, very important thing to note is that Rashok's down here at the bottom has been nerfed very, very heavily. So you're able to directly compare the eye level of your Rashok trinket to, say, something like Ominous Chromatic Essence or Neltharian's Call to Suffering, which likely will be replacing Rashok's for a lot of the early progression that we're going to be going into. But it's also going to be highlighting some of our top trinkets. As you can notice, this is, again, just an in-general chart. There's a couple of exceptions we're going to go over. One of them is Balefire Branch for Disc Priests. That's actually going to be, it should be quite a good trinket. It's a 1.5-minute cooldown. Mastery with an on-use of Intellect that decays over time. This one should be really good for Disc, especially if you're running more of a 1.5 or 2-minute type setup, which is going to be talked about in my Disc guides when they go live. But the more that you're focusing on these 1.5-minute type of ramp windows, the better that this trinket is actually going to be. Another one is Amalgam 7th Spine, which is not listed on the chart. You can see here which spells it actually activates. So for Disc Priest, it activates off Shield and Shadow Mend, which is actually just Flash Heal, making it not very good. But for something like Resto Druid, where it's Rejuve and Regrowth, it would be quite a bit better. You'd have to check whenever you go to the Questionably Epic site and go to Trinkets, it enters it for your character. So if you are a Resto Druid, you'd be able to pull up a chart just like this when the season goes live and be able to compare the full values. But I know that's one thing they're working on. And of course, this chart is going to change a little bit in case there's some last-minute trinket tuning changes. But what we know so far is that stat sticks kind of just rule all. You can see at the very top is the 4 very far ahead trinkets that we have. First of which is Pip's Emerald Friendship Badge. This is really good because the uptime is very high, where you're getting either Mastery or Verse or Crit, and you're kind of just cycling between all of them. You get the passive bonus and empowers it before it diminishes over 12 seconds. And so it kind of gives you a new buff, it's very strong, diminishes over time, gives you another buff afterwards. I pretty much always was cycling between a different buff almost all the time, so this is a really high uptime trinket that you have, always giving you some kind of value on hand. It's kind of a shame you don't actually have any haste from it. The next one is the Coagulated Venusaur Blood. That last one drops from Council of Dreams in the raid. This one drops from the Everbloom dungeon. And it's a very basic stat stick. Int and you get crit, right? This drops from Everbloom and it'll basically just be a good stat to be able to farm up if you like crit. Tearstone, this should be no surprise. It was actually insane at the start of Dawn of the Infinite, and they significantly nerfed it. Again, what you have to do is you have to use the Tearstone, do healing, cap out the resource, and then it passively heals whenever one of your allies falls low. Summons an echo of your past self, heals them, and grants haste before the record is lost, right? This is a very powerful trinket that you're going to have on hand, but it's going to require a lot more micromanagement than something like Sea Star, right? Which is from Throne of the Tides, I believe, where it's versatility and intellect, and you just get it and you are set. So those are going to be like the 4 18 kind of trinkets that you have on hand. Then, of course, depending on your secondary stats, these idols of the Lifebinder, Earth Warder, whatever, are the jewel crafting crafted trinkets that you're able to make for yourself. Sustaining Alchemist Stone is obviously from Alchemy. And then it starts going a little bit further down into the list. And this is why I say, keep in mind that some things are actually able to change, because some of these trinkets are just really, really bad at the moment. This Smoldering Seedling is a very adorable trinket. You are planting the seedling and you attempt to put out the flames. So basically you put down a seedling when you activate the trinket, and it's like a half health little seedling that you then have to target and then have to directly heal. And then as you're healing, it starts spreading out the healing that it receives to other people. While this is happening, it's also burning. And so you have to make sure that you keep it alive over the course of the 12 seconds that you have. And then if you do keep it alive, then you proc mastery. So this is bad for a number of reasons. One, the healing kind of caps out very easily, and so you're not producing more healing, which is not replicating to other players. But then you have to delay the gratification of getting that mastery. It's not like you gain mastery the second you use it, and then it goes away when the seedling burns down or expires or whatever. It's after the seedling stays alive for 12 seconds, then you get it. So you'd have to like drop it, heal it while there's some damage going out, and then you get your mastery buff for when it ends, and then hopefully there's more damage going out at that point that you then are using the mastery buff to take advantage of. So yeah, this one's pretty bad. At the bottom of our list, by the way, is this Blossom of Amirdrasil. This is buffed a couple of times. I believe there's also a couple of bugs still active on it. And so again, this is why I want to emphasize you should definitely keep an eye on this in case they do add some last minute buffs, because this is dropped from Farak. This is the final boss, very rare trinket. And what it does is it gives you flat haste, and then healing an ally below 80% grants them the Blossom, heals them for X amount over 6 seconds. And then if the target's above 95% when the effect expires, so after that 6-second period, the Blossom then spreads to allies to also heal them. And if the target is not fully healed, the Blossom then blooms to absorb damage instead. So you'd have to like put the Blossom onto a target and then keep them high health or full health to cause the Blossom to spread to go heal more people. And yeah, it looks like it does a decent amount of healing on PTR on its own, but then you also have to keep in mind that it's not giving any primary stat, so it needs to do even more healing than that to make up for it. But meanwhile, you could just run something like the Venusaur Blood and just get, instant crit and be able to take advantage of it from there. So there's a couple little things. While the biggest thing I also want to emphasize is that there's a lot of like mid trinkets that are all kind of like close together. Fractured Tomorrows is like a 3-minute on use, your best secondary. It's int and then your best secondary. That's from Dawn of the Infinites. The Voodoo Totem is like this ramping single target heal. The Music Box is where your heals proc heals, and then if you get the ring, then you can alternate between the damage and heal procs. That's pretty mid as well. And they basically start by competing directly with like the Dragon Scale. Like the highest level Music Box is competing with a Dragon Scale from the last raid. So again, a lot of these healer trinkets are extremely, extremely mid. And it looks like once the 10.2 nerfs hit for Rashaks, you're going to want to drop that and run Nelth's Call to Suffering, which means if you don't have this already, particularly if you're like a priest healer, if you don't have this already, you want to make sure that you are getting that quite rapidly to be able to get yourself prepared. One thing you always want to keep in mind. Like I mentioned before, Disc might really love Balefire Branch when you're playing these really heavy 1.5-minute windows. It looks like it. Looks like we're heading in that direction. But if you're going to be playing more of like the 30-second window play style, especially when you get your 4 set, that's where you might go more into the Friendship Badge, Venusaur Blood, C-Star, like the passive secondary stats. So you always have some kind of buff going forward with you every single time you have like a 30-second mini ramp with Mindbender. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. I'll elaborate some more on it when we have our disc guides out, which should be around the corner very, very soon. But suffice it to say, the more that you're leaning on 1.5-minute cooldown windows, the more important it's actually going to be. I know I mentioned it before, but Amalgam 7 Spine for most specs, not looking too great. And I forgot to mention, there's this crazy trinket. It's Leaf of the Ancient Protectors. This one is, just wait until you see this one. Okay, here, this trinket gives you mastery, envelops an ally in ancient protection. All right. It absorbs about 100,000 damage. This is what we were doing on the PTR, around 440 eye levels where we were scaled to. It absorbs about 100,000 damage, which is maybe 20% of a target's life. And then if the protection is fully consumed, then that ally gains like 1,000 versatility or something. This thing is atrocious. This is going to be replacing the ward, and it's worse than the ward. So again, that's why I'm saying there's a high likelihood that there's going to be some changes to a number of these trinkets. And if this trinket was actually good, it's a 1-minute cooldown, and I would really love it if we had a 1-minute cooldown shield for this incoming tier to particularly help us with all the crazy burst damages happening in dungeons. But yeah, at the moment, it's looking pretty rough. Lastly, I did want to highlight some damage trinkets for those who are interested in the damage trinkets in M+. This one is really powerful. It's called Bellorelos. Yeah, Bellorelos. Which is int with an on-use maelstrom, which is a 2-minute cooldown, and you're basically moving, and you're moving very slowly as you are channeling this or as you're casting it. And then when the cast completes, you explode for damage, hitting everything around you. It's a very, very short range, kind of like a Holy Nova if you play Priest. And it's just a quick explosion, and then you're done. You have to keep in mind that once it goes off, then you receive a dot for some of the damage done. And so that dot could potentially kill you. Is something to kind of keep in mind on hand. But this was doing a crazy amount of damage in our PTR testing, as was Augury of the Primal Flame. No primary stat on this one, but it does give you crit. And there we go, excuse me. Your spells and abilities have a chance to grant Annihilating Flame, causing your crit strikes to deal additional damage as fire split between nearby enemies, and the fire may deal X damage before fading, further increased by crit strikes. So, 2 really high value AoE trinkets, and keep in mind that this one is crit and it relies on you having lots of crit. So specs that don't have much or are not really speccing into that would not enjoy this as much for its overall damage. But it looks like Bellorelos is going to be more of the overall like high damage trinket that you would run in M+, kind of like the new Beacon of Beyond, because it is going to be increasing its damage with up to 5 targets. It is going to be splitting that damage between all the enemies it's hit, and keep in mind, it's going to deal a little bit of bounce back damage onto you over 12 seconds. So those are some of the big options that you're going to be looking for going forward. And both Bellorelos and Augury, I think Augury is dropping from the raid itself. I thought it was, oh, I guess it also is dropping off Harak. Yeah, so we have the Harak trinket, and this one's off Tindral. So it's late bosses for damage, dungeons, and some mid-level bosses for stat sticks. That'll be very helpful for you. And certain specs like Disc would want Balefire or Druid maybe. Citation needed. Check questionableepic.com if you'd like the Amalgam 7 Spine. But a lot of the proc rates for Amalgams are just bad for a number of the different healers. Like I mentioned before, Disc has it with Shield and Flash Heal. Holy Priest has Heal and Flash Heal on hand. Mistweaver has Vivify and Envelop. You know, there's a number of them that are maybe not as good of activators as you would probably want to have. Actually, Mistweaver's okay, but I think they might have better options too. But if you'd like to find this list, it will be up on Questionably Epic. I think this is still the PTR testing that they've been doing so far. I'm pretty sure with the season start at the very latest, the live build will be up there, and you can go in, plug in your character. You can not only find this trinket list, which will also show you by item level, but you'll also be able to compare gear that's in your bags to be able to find out what's going to be most preferred. questionableepic.com/live has a crazy amount of resources on hand. Volk also has a section going over some of the trinkets so far, and he's going to be adding to that list as we get more information. So check all that stuff out because his content is great. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Be sure to follow for some more content as we're going to have lots of guides on the way. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Hope y'all enjoyed it, and I'll catch y'all next time.